All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you guys so much for coming today. I'm really excited because this is our first PM interview boot camp. After doing the technical interview boot camp, I got a lot of requests to set up a PM one. So this is our first event. We'll see how it goes. And if it's a big success, then we will continue with the series. Today, we are joined by Matt Dickson, who actually I have gotten to work with in the past. He is a partner group program manager at Microsoft and has done a lot of really awesome things, has a bunch of patents, and is overall just an awesome mentor and an awesome person. So I'm really looking forward to you guys getting to know him a little bit and a few announcements. One, this event is recorded, so turn your video on or off accordingly. Two, while Matt comes, he's providing his Microsoft expertise. This event is in no way affiliated with Microsoft and their points of view. Everything that he says today is coming from inside of his brain. And then at the end of the event, there will be a feedback form. It should take about 2 minutes to fill out. If you're willing to do that, that would be awesome. So without further ado, I'm going to let Matt introduce himself, and then we'll get started.
Hey, thank you very much, Julia. It's great to be here. I guess I've been around in the industry for quite a while now, so it feels quite a long time. So 12 years at Microsoft and 8 years at other software companies before that, and talk even before that at other in other IT roles. But I guess I worked my way into this position, starting off at pretty simple roles in a help desk, answering calls at a store in Kmart when something went wrong, or moving up from there to sort of managing networks, managing systems, and that sort of led me into how I went out to selling with sort of big companies like Computer Associates, and eventually got me into engineering. And so that customer experience that I had in terms of understanding how customers' environments were and how they were operating and what they were trying to do, served me well as a program manager, trying to work out what a customer's needs was, what a product needed to do to be successful in order to to meet that need. And so I've been sort of in a PM sort of a role in various sort of capacities and various products over the last sort of 20 years, based on sort of that experience, and it's been great. I've really enjoyed it, so happy to get started. So do you want me to project and start to show some stuff there?
Yeah, let's start with the presentation.
Sure, let's do that. Presentation's relatively simple. Let me know if that's showing. Oh, it's not showing yet. I have to say share. Okay, cool. So I figured the first thing I do, let me know if that's coming through, is just give you an idea of what a program manager does. So it's also seen this termed as like a technical product manager as well. So other companies may refer to it as a technical product manager. But a program manager, we sort of see ourselves involved in all stages of a product life cycle. So they're there at the beginning to sort of help work out what you've got to do and why you've got to do it, which is, I think, one of the most important questions that a sort of a PM is there to answer is, what you do and why you do it, the reasons, the prioritization, the things that are going to make the product successful are quite often, in the hands of the PM to make sure we identify the right things at the right time. As part of that, you're really sort of building out those requirements, based on whether it's the customer interviews that you've done, the industry analysis that you've done, the feedback that you've gotten about your competitive solutions that are out there. But you're really building up those requirements that says, if we're going to build this product or we're going to create this feature, these are the key things that it has to be able to do. It has to be able to do A, B, and C. If it can't do A, B, and C, then hey, we might as well not release it. And with that, that comes with a lot of tough sort of decisions that you're going to have to make. Not everything you want to do, you'll be able to do initially. So, that prioritization is hard. The other thing that a PM sort of finds themselves doing is, in bigger companies and bigger teams, you quite often find that in order for you to be successful, another team in the company, another product in the company needs to do something on your behalf. Maybe they need to enable a feature in order for your service to work. So there's also these cross-team dependencies, which is really quite often negotiations to say, hey, this is really important to us. If you can do this, that this is the impact that we'll have. So we quite often work on those. The other big thing is, after we've gone through the prioritization and planning and sort of worked out with engineering what can be delivered, then there's, you're going in, you're sort of preparing to launch the product, which is everything from, helping review what goes on with the, the documentation that gets created, the business model and business plan that you have for, for launching and selling the product, the your web presence, what's the right website to be out there, what's your sales experience, is it a web-driven sales experience, is it a a people and a sort of a direct sales experience, which you're going to have some very different sort of decisions to go ahead and make. And then once you've got it out, once you've got the product out there, you're sort of rinsing and repeating. You're always gathering feedback. You always have a backlog of things that you wanted to do but you weren't able to do in the last release. And you're balancing those things of the feedback that's coming in, the things that you want to do next, as well as some of the technical debt that you're probably building up as a product that you want to improve on as well, so that you can iterate faster or get your releases out quicker, be a little bit more agile. So that's hopefully a little bit about what the PM does. And so the next thing I'll do is just go through a little bit of the things about what a typical interview process for PMs sort of look like. No surprise, there's tons of good information on the various, if you're going to interview with a company, going to go to their career site, they'll have a lot of good information for you to follow about, how to prepare and what to get ready for. And, you should always be sort of looking for that. But once you've applied for a role, if there's interest, there'll typically be a screening call. Typically HR, or sorry, not HR, the recruiters would reach out, based on your resume, based on your submission, just to have a chat to you about the role, about what you've been doing, and sort of pass that information on to the hiring manager. Typically, if after that, there's typically like an informational meeting that may happen. If the hiring manager is interested in potentially going forward, then typically they would reach out and have a single chat, maybe a phone call, or depending on your location, maybe meet up in person, although the meeting in person thing's gotten a lot more difficult recently. But at least just a chat to see a little bit about what the hiring manager's doing, what they're looking for, and a little bit about you, so it gets deeper than what's just in the resume, to work out if there's something to go forward with. And then after that, it typically ends up being if that's successful, then an interview loop would get set up. Typically, in the past, that's always been a on-site with some phone type, whether it be Teams or Zoom or Skype or whatever your application is du jour, to go through that process. So typically in the past, it had been a lot of on-site interviews with, maybe in our case, video interviews with some other people in other locations, are typically done in a day. But today, in today's environment, that's all going to be done via calls like this. And the biggest thing I would always advise is, for those things, follow. There's great guidelines on all the sites that tell you what to prepare for. But just like today, I joined this meeting a little earlier. Julie and I made sure that the tech worked, the video worked. She taught me a few things that I should be doing with the screen for sharing. Made sure the mics, everything was going. So give yourself that time, so you're not so that you come into the meeting with a good state of mind. And then you're there. And then, so to be prepared for the meeting, the other thing to do, in addition to looking at those insights areas, is be sure you can describe yourself in a couple of, in a couple of bullets, a couple of sentences, to understand what's your story, what's your journey, and what brought you here, and and sort of why you're interested in this. Being able to articulate that quickly and easily is very helpful. Another thing that's really helpful in these discussions is to really come in and have done some homework. Understand the company that you're chatting to, understand the products that they have, and in particular, if you're going into a particular product, have an understanding of it. There's typically great information out there on the web that will let that research be relatively easy, and sort of come in with some questions, come in with some insights. It's really helpful to know that the person was interested enough to sort of to take interest in the not only the role but also like took some time to research and understand. The other thing to do there is make sure that you're being understood. When you're describing something, take a breath, take your time. Sometimes it's very nerve-wracking to go into an interview. So, take a breath, take a drink, just make sure, drink water. Make sure that you're able to articulate yourself in such a way that you're not just continuing to go on. And ask if there's any clarifying questions. Ask if your responses are making sense. And in your responses, try to be as specific as possible. In particular, on the PM side, about not just what you did, which is helpful, but why. A lot of the time, like the PM part is like why you should do something is very important. And in that, you're sort of showing your thinking. You're showing the logic that you would take, the processes that you would go through in order to come to a decision, or in order to get to an opinion. So that's that's my update. That's the deck. Any other thoughts, questions, Julia?
Yeah, so we got a few different questions in the chat that you sort of answered some of them, but let's see. One question was, can you help to address how to stand out during the resume application / screening process?
Sure. Something that helps is things that show, like with every role that you're going to come into, maybe you have to move to a new location, maybe you have to learn a new discipline or a new product area, or you're being disciplined. Maybe you've been involved in customer support, or maybe you've been involved in some other facet. But what you're trying to do is to show that when you come to that team, that you've got something that you can bring. That what you're bringing could be just the raw talent and enthusiasm, or it could be experience in a particular, maybe you've got experience in retail, and this is a role in sort of a retail organization. Being able to show that you have some relevant experience, or being able to map experiences you have to what they're looking for, is really helpful. Once again, it shows that you've done your homework, and it also shows that as part of joining a team, the types of things that you would have to offer.
Awesome. Another question that we got from Sanjivani was, what are typical expectations for take-home interview projects, and how can we prepare? Is that something that Microsoft does?
I can't comment for the whole of Microsoft. On the PM side, we typically don't have, I should say in my team, that's what we can talk about. We haven't typically had sort of take-home projects. It's normally been the interview process is something that we do in person. It's a verbal discussion. Quite often it involves whiteboards and pens, and you can sort of write everything out with boxes and lines and triangles, and work out what you want to do that way.
Okay, here's a question that I've asked you before, but everyone is curious to know. So if I'm currently a software engineer, what advice do you have with regards to moving in the PM direction? I see myself moving to PM after several years as a software engineer after graduation.
So one, I think it's definitely a career path that people can look at. Like it's having a strong engineering background, because, or let me restart that. Like in terms of PM, there's many different roles and sort of specialities that you can have. It could be a heavy focus on business. It could be a heavy focus on the customer. It could be a heavy focus on a particular technology. But in all of those cases, it really helps to be grounded in engineering. So I have a computer science background. I've been sort of working in engineering teams for a long time, so that really helps. But if you had been a commercial developer, I think that really helps. I know of a number of PMs that have been very successful, and they have that knowledge of what, that true knowledge of what it takes for a team to go ahead and deliver what they're being asked from the PM. So there's some great empathy that comes with that. And then, as a dev, you can always get involved in understanding like customer requirements, customer feedback. That's also something like PMs are always going to help you with and bring you into. So I think it's a good idea, great aspiration, and I think that you can do that as a developer. You can have a bit of it more of an affinity for what the customer requirements are, and in your day-to-day role as well.
Great advice. Honestly, that should go, like, we need to take that and just post it everywhere because everyone has that question. So in the interest of time here, I think we should go ahead and get started with the mock interview, and we can take more questions afterwards.
Sure.
All right. So the dynamic that we're going to be doing here is similar to the past few technical interview boot camps, where our industry professional is going to be the one getting interviewed so that we can see what a good response would look like. So I'm going to be interviewing Matt, which is funny because a few years ago, he actually interviewed me.
And you got a hire, by the way, too. So,
Yes, but I actually chose to stay with SWE, and in the interest of moving towards PM after developing myself as an engineer first a little bit, which was the advice that I got from a lot of people.
yeah, and I think that was good advice.
Yeah, but I don't know. The work that Matt does is pretty cool, so I definitely do hope to go in that direction eventually. But now I am an interviewer. So, hello, Matt. Thank you so much for coming to interview with Microsoft today. I'm Julia Lieberman. I'm going to be asking you a few questions, and at the end, if you have any questions for me, we can go, feel free to ask them at the end. Normally in an interview, the interviewer will introduce themselves a little bit more, but we don't need to do that. So I do think it is good to understand how to introduce yourself, though, when you are being interviewed. So Matt, please introduce yourself.
Sure.
Tell me about
So
yourself.
my name's Mathew Dixon. And in this case, what I would be doing is giving you, the relevant feedback about my position as a PM. Having 20 years of PM experience across, multiple products and across multiple companies, and engaging everything from managing small features all the way through to the idea of how do I get a very large feature or a large release greenlit and over the line in order to have a successful product out the door.
Cool. And if you were just a university graduate and you were like, what are the things that
That's a very good thought. So if I was a university graduate, in my background, I would be trying to make sure that people could understand from either the classes that I had taken, the internships that I had been part of, or any jobs that I had, was there key alignment from the roles that I had taken to the role that I was trying to move into, whether that be a related industry like a retail that come to mind, or manufacturing or something like that, or whether it was classes or projects or sort of internships where you had worked on some similar areas, things that were trying to show that affinity, and also anything that shows that shows your energy, your passion, and what you've done in order to sort of achieve goals that you've had.
Right. Cool. Well, we're going to jump into the questions now, and we will get some ideas of most of those things, actually. We'll hear about some scenarios where you use PM skills. So we'll start with the behavioral. Please describe a situation when you came up to speed quickly on new tools, methods, or processes.
Sure. So a couple of years ago, I joined the Windows Defender team. Windows Defender is the built-in anti-malware, antivirus product that's in Windows. I was, relatively familiar with the product, relatively familiar with the problem space. However, like the team I was moving into was managing a lot of the back-end processes and workflows that exist that make sure that all the regular anti-malware signature updates are created, they're tested, they're frequently updated, and they go out 4 or 5 times a day to millions of PCs and servers around the world. And so that was something that was new. There's a whole new, there's a whole set of automation pipelines that were out there that were sort of analyzing thousands of files that were samples, either doing static analysis to see what it did, or dynamic analysis, running it to see what it was going to do, machine learning analysis, doing analysis that was actually pulling out features out of applications as they were brought in as well, so that we could run machine learning against them. But it was a series of these pipelines, and some of the main things that were coming out of that was sort of our QA validation against known good and known bad, but also identification of new samples to have an opinion as to whether we thought that they were potentially good or potentially bad software. And so there was a lot of internal documentation to review. This wasn't a scenario where you could go to the web and sort of find out more about these pipelines, because it was, these were very much sort of internal solutions. So there was a lot of good internal doc to review, but to help get me up to speed, that was my main thing, so that I could speak intelligently about what was going on, or understand the conversations that were happening as people were describing their day-to-day work. So as I was reviewing, I was finding like minor drift in what I was reading, like some areas hadn't been updated or changed since updates that had been done previously to whether it's to improve efficiency or add some extra capabilities. And so I found that digging in to sort of update those documents and get them up to the very latest did a couple of things. One, it dramatically increased my knowledge. One, I had to get up to speed a lot faster, because if you're actually updating the documentation or updating the processes to describe what it is, you have to really know it well. It meant I also worked out a lot more of the interdependencies between these pipelines that were scanning files for malware as they came in. And I got a whole new set of jargon and 3-letter acronyms that I got to learn about the different names and code names for these systems. So that was one big benefit for digging in. I learned a lot, and I learned it quickly. And the other thing was it sort of assisted the team as well. It was something that the team needed, and it was something that I was able to do. So that that was also great. And then from me as a PM, with that understanding, it sort of helped me with identification and sort of prioritization of new capabilities and features. With that understanding of what was there, it was a lot easier to sort of understand when new requests were coming in or feature capabilities were coming in, like where they would fit, how they would be done, and what the impact of that would be onto these pipelines. So it was a really sort of a good outcome for me anyway. So in summary, it was kind of like, I would always say, jump in and learn. And in this case, unfortunately, there wasn't a lot of public information out there, but in many cases there's a lot, like whether it's a YouTube video or public documentation that you can read up about the topic. You can read or watch or learn about something very rapidly. So read, learn, watch what you can. And then the other thing is, don't be afraid to ask a friend, ask a person, ask a teammate. And I did this plenty of times. Sometimes it was a quick, chat message. Other times it would be a call. Other times we'd, go off to a whiteboard in a room and, draw out the pictures, draw out what the pipeline was doing in order to understand. So, use all of those methods to really get yourself up to speed.
So when you were reaching out to other people for help in understanding, how did you find the right people and how did you make sure that you were using their time effectively?
So yeah, that was good. So fortunately, in this case here in the team, you'd probably ask around. Like you would have, like when I first joined, there's a few people I knew. So I did rely on them to say, hey, I'm trying to find out about X. Who's the person who knows about X that I should go and have a chat to? That was one thing, like, starting to build up a network of people to ask and get direction from. And two was, once you found the people, sort of being respectful of their time. Don't schedule a meeting when you could just get it done quickly with an email or a chat message. So, trying to work out like things like that. And if it did need a meeting, then always sort of make sure that you were A, sort of grateful for the time, B, respectful of the time, and C, sort of make sure that the person in that meeting sort of understood what you were trying to get out of this and what you were trying to do and sort of how it could help them as well.
Awesome. Okay. That was a really great answer. So moving on to another question that I think is especially relevant these days. So can you describe your most recent experience working with a virtual team? What are the challenges that you're facing and how do you work through them and how do you effectively communicate with people in this new world of collaboration?
You're right. So like I think COVID's really heightened the importance of virtual teams and what we have to do as a virtual community to get things done. Um, so a couple of things like for virtual teams, like a couple of guiding principles we try to have, and this is true for any team. It just gets more important when um, these people aren't in the same room or you don't have big rooms of people talking to big rooms of people. Um, so a couple of sort of guiding principles is really like establish sort of the goals, like make sure you all agree on where you're going and sort of why you're going in that direction, like what you're trying to achieve out of this V team, what that goal is. Um, Within the V team, with those multiple members, just make sure everyone's clear about their responsibilities. Um, there are certain people that would be leading um, various areas of that virtual team, and it should be pretty clear who's leading that work and who's the go-to person for that area. And V teams are never static, so there's quite often as you get started, you find you need to add new people. As that happens, take the time to get them up to speed as well. Make sure that they're aware of what's going on and that they can sort of come in and understand like if what everyone is trying to do and the role of everyone in that virtual team. So an example that I can give, a recent example was, we'd recently sort of completed, a planning milestone. And that was where we had gone through our backlogs. We'd looked at, what customer ask was, what the businesses needed, what the big customers were looking for, and identified what our roadmap of updates would look like, and worked with, engineering on how to build that out and get that done. And at the end of that process, I started a process to get a retrospective together to work out, we completed planning, but what are the things that we could do better, like, um, and where we could improve, and so it sort of came up to, the things, what should we stop doing, what should we improve, and what are the things that we should keep doing. And so we've got a medium-sized team of PMs. We're in different locations and time zones around the world, and all have varying responsibilities for whether it's features, products, or areas that we look after. Some are more business focused, some are more product focused, some are more technology, um, and as I mentioned, all over the world. So the goal was pretty simple, like identify like the improvements that with the PM team could make in our planning process, and that's our goal there, is to make the not only the PM's life easier, but also come up with a better a better set of information that we can provide to engineering, a better set of uh, requirements to help guide that that process, the engineering process to deliver product. And so we kind of realized like the success in this would be a cross-team agreement, because there's multiple, not only multiple PMs in multiple locations, there's multiple teams as well. And so success would be that we'd sort of come up with a cross-team agreement on these new recommendations. Ultimately, we could only really measure that in that next planning cycle. And in reality, what we're going into is more continuous improvement, continuous updates. But that whole idea of being able to, we would know when we're successful because we'd be able to measure that we're successful. And so, based on time zone and proximity, we had a couple of people had the role of sort of gathering feedback from the team. So rather than pulling everyone into, a very large, long meeting, a couple of people went out and went out to the team, each person, and got their feedback about the types of problems that they faced, or the things that went well, the things they wanted to continue, the things that they wanted to change. And with that information, they came back to the virtual team to review all of that feedback. And as part of that, like we identified a few sort of key, in that interview process, identified a few sort of key themes or key areas, which was, we one of our partner teams was using an awesome feature tracking process based on Azure DevOps. So that was like a no-brainer for us to, like, we should adopt this. It's going to sort of simplify how we collate and prioritize all the customer evidence that comes in. It was good for reporting as well, and it had this added benefit of when it comes time to the engineering conversations, it's already in Azure DevOps, which is like an easy thing for us to move over into the engineering world for delivery. We also wanted to get more into a process of continuous planning. So rather than feeling a little rushed towards the end, making sure that we've got a lot of the planning done earlier. And so at the time when it's time to talk about our new capabilities or new, next milestone, next semester, or next sprint that we're going into, we just have to dust off what's there to say, okay, here's the latest, the next thing in the list. Here's what it looks like, and here's what what a customer would tell us to be successful. Here's what a customer would require for us to be successful. And so that's something that causes, in our mind, it's going to cause less strain on the system, because we'll have a lot of the pieces ready to go, and it will be a more delta updates to have those discussions. Other areas we sort of looked at was sort of consistency in the specs and stories and how they're written. We've got a growing team, and there's different levels of detail based on people's backgrounds, where they've come from, their experience, and all that diversity is great because it brings something to the team. And so what we're looking to do is like maintain that diversity, maintain that uniqueness of thought that comes in, but also make sure that we are able to communicate it in the same voice, so that we've got a common way of in a common voice of how we were describing like the priorities, the needs, and the level of detail that we provide in our communications to engineering. That's sort of where we're looking. And so, COVID sort of added that additional degree of difficulty. Like in the past, a lot of this, big parts of this could have been done face to face, but now, we're doing it all on calls like this. Everyone's in their room like this one, chatting away and getting it done. So it's a new way of getting things done. So just getting on that, establishing those goals, understanding what success looks like, getting a cadence for how we're going to check in and measure our progress, and then executing on that in order to come up with a recommendation. And so now what we're doing is, we're still going through that process to get that consistency, get that everyone bought in, that there's some changes that we want to make.
And when you've been working with this virtual team and you need to add new people in, how do you integrate them in when they are not familiar with anyone else or the product or what exactly you're trying to do? Like, what happens if you get a new hire?
Oh, good question. So a new hire, there'd be a couple of different things outside of the virtual team, just for just a new hire in general. You would always make sure that you sort of have to have a little bit of a training plan and get them up to speed plan as to how they can understand, what our products are, what their capabilities are, what the systems are. So in parallel with like integrating them into the virtual team, we'd make sure that they had a good sort of a training plan. And even as sort of a technique that we've quite often ask is, if they get stuck, like come over and ask, like don't get stuck, come over and ask, we'll go to the whiteboard. It's quite often quicker and easier, like to have a 5-minute conversation at a whiteboard or a 5-minute Zoom chat, than it would be to write an email with all the exquisite detail in it and then compose a response. So we try that to sort of speed up, a new hire's sort of integration. And then the other parts is, getting introduced to the virtual team. There would be like know the goals and what you were trying to do and what success looked like, but you'd be mindful of the responsibilities that you gave them, so that they had responsibilities that would allow them to learn, as opposed to responsibilities that would make it very difficult for them to be successful. So give them the ability to learn within the team, give them the ability to have success, and they'll learn from the other work that's going on in that team.
Awesome. Good answer. So, okay, now let's get into a little bit more hands-on type question. So, we'll go to the hypothetical one. So suppose you were asked to create an application. So Matt and I talked a little bit ahead of time, and he's a big biker. I'm also a big biker. So this is something that I think we both find a little bit relevant. So suppose—
The mountain bike type, not the gasoline type.
Yes. that doesn't even come into my mind to clarify that. Suppose you were asked to create an application that helps you find and buy the right bike, not motorbike. Your first task is to create a requirement spec for review and approval. What would you do?
Cool. So sounds like a fun project. I think, at first, once again, you should probably see a theme here. I'd understand what success looked like. And so in this case, it's, really important to understand and be able to establish the goals. So, in this case here, I understand like what we want is team buy-in, that this spec that I've written, this set of requirements or story that I've written is, if we go ahead and execute against that, we're going to be successful. And so that's what, I'm expecting, like establishing my goals. In order to get there, I'd also be looking to, as part of that process, make sure that we establish more than just the goal, but, the detail under that, which is it enough just to find the right type of bike and leave it there? Example, like maybe we find my favorite bike would be a mountain bike, and that will be enough. Or does this application have to also identify and show specific brands and models of bikes, like the level of sort of detail sort of gets more fine-grained and more specific? And does the app need to include like a buying experience, or is it just the finding experience, or is it also the linking me to a seller or becoming part of a marketplace where I can buy through that as well, which could link to maybe potential revenue streams for this application. And then through that, what's that expected sort of timeline and sort of key milestones? Is this tied to a specific time, like spring, like when the weather's improving and people want to buy bikes and get out there? I mentioned it before, but business model, revenue, those things are very important things to know as well. Like, why am I doing this? Is this sponsored by a bike manufacturer and that's where the revenue is going to come from? Or are we looking to do this through, is ad sales a key part of this? Or are we trying to, we already have a marketplace for bikes and we're trying to improve the experience for filtering and finding the right bike for the right person. So I would be going through and really establishing up front a lot of those sort of key goals and key sort of big questions about the scenarios we're going to go after. With that in place, I'd be then going out and reviewing the market. Review what's out there. Like, there's probably 1,000,001. If you go to a bike website, there's there's filtering solutions that help you find. If you go to, you go to your customers and you find out, if you can find customers, go talk to them. Like, what are the things that they struggle with when they're trying to identify a bike? What's the technology that's available out there? Is there something that I can use? Whether it's, location details on the phone, or maybe there's, health settings on the phone, things like that that can help give you some insights into, what the customer was looking for. And then what I would be taking, based on that review of, market and what people were looking for, be putting together like a mock-up review. In this case, we'd be looking to get a mock-up of the application, of the experience, of what was going on, and I'd want to start to use that in, test discussions, get buy-in from, some of the key stakeholders that would be involved in like a final review and a final say yes. And so rather than trying to, go off in a, into a small little room, go off and build all these things and come back and, say, Eureka, we've done it. What I'd be doing would be getting something quick, prototype up, so that you could use that to have one-on-one discussions with your key stakeholders. And the goal there is really, you're looking to get alignment with, engineering that are going to do the work, so that they can see the asks, they can see the requirements, and they can also sort of give some input as to, what it's going to take to get there. You get that same feedback from your management. Potential partners that are in this delivering, you get their feedback as well. And where possible, as a result of that, iteration with them, these key stakeholders are buying into what you want to do. And so in that, you'd be trying to not only sort of go through like the key workflows and experiences to, how you understood a person and what was their decision criteria to identify a bike that would fit their needs, and sort of then like linking out to external sites that buy bike that would sell bikes, I should say. So you would have those sort of that workflow or experience thing for people to look through. But it's not enough just to say that this would look great. You've got to make sure that from a business point of view, that you've got your business model projections, they're going to work in terms of expected revenue or expected income sources would come through. That would also start to include the timelines, which would include your heavily be influenced by the engineering feedback about how long it's going to take to get things done. So in terms of having maybe proof of concept up and running, or what you could have as part of a trial that you could get people to view and get some feedback on, all the way through to having something that you could put into the store and make it available for people to use. So have those timelines, and in those discussions, you'd be taking input, you should be learning. You should be very open to learning, and you'll quite often find that it's very sort of humbling doing that process. You think you've thought of everything. In that process, you find that there's big areas, things that you've missed, and having humility, having the ability to recognize that, hey, someone else had a better idea than mine, someone thought of something that I didn't, is really important, because you include that. They respect you for that. They are then more supportive of your project as you go through it, because it's got parts of their inputs in it. So after you've gone through that process, you've gathered all that feedback, you then go through and review that proposal. In particular, there should be one where you've got all the stakeholders bought in. So whether that's engineering, your sales, your marketing, all the people that are going to be there to say that this is going to be successful. So my outcome here would be, in terms of a proposal, those key people would be in the room with me or on the call with me, and we'd walk through a proposal of that, like that minimum viable product, plus sort of that roadmap that showed, here's what we need to be successful, and here's the most logical things that we would do next after that as well. These were important capabilities, features, feedback, but we can release fast and early without them, but we should be adding those with time. Here's what the engineering sort of timelines would look like to deliver. Here's that deployment plan, how we would preview and test with customers, how we would that plan to monitor the feedback for how the app's used, being able to sort of adjust the application, the usage based on based on that feedback, and then launch. And then after launch, you've got that roadmap. That roadmap should be there. Like there's a certain amount of that roadmap which is going to be, here's what I've done, here's what I think I needed to do. But once you've released the product, it's in the real world, you're going to get real world feedback. And so there'll be adjustments that you'll have to make based on actual customer usage, based on what's really going on. And then there's other techniques you could include, like A/B testing and all sorts of fun things.
I'm going to throw you for a little bit of a loop here. Let's say you've set up a timeline with your engineers and with your sales team and with your potential customers, and maybe you have a few $1 million riding on this. Now, you're supposed to release in a month, and your engineers are telling you that they actually cannot get it done that quickly. One of the features that you've designed is not going to be implementable in the way that you've designed, and in order to do that and even complete some section of this project, they're going to need more time, maybe more engineers. What do you do? How do you reprioritize? And what do you tell your customers about the delays?
Okay, so the short thing I would try to do would be, is there a way to avoid the delay? And that's not just saying, well, everyone has to work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in order to get there. Like the first thing that you would really go back to is the feature, the update, the component that was causing the problem, and see if we can rescope what needs to be done in order to make it deliverable on the timelines that we would want, and still deliver on the customer promise. And that would be the very first thing that you would do, because that could be a way of adjusting expectations, adjusting what the product's going to deliver, and keep the timeline. And then that additional work, those additional things become your backlog items, the things that you could do next based on feedback. So that would be my first thing. If that wasn't an option, or if we looked in that and that wasn't there, then I think what you'd be starting to look at is, are there external assistance that you can get? Is there external teams, either within the group or outside the group, that can provide the assistance in order to get you over the hump here? But the very worst case that you could run into is, even with all of that assistance, or maybe you can't get the assistance in time, whether it's through contracts or partnership, you may have to delay, which is that's not a fun thing for anybody. But that's why you track projects, you track what you're doing to make sure that am I going to make a date, or do I have to adjust? So all of those options would be up for grabs, and that's not fun times when you get to that level.
I have heard that when engineers say, okay, it's probably going to take me 6 weeks to complete something, you turn that into 10 weeks.
Yeah, so our engineering managers have got really good ways of rolling up those estimates and making sure that they take care of the the times that people are going to be away, or meeting times, and the fact that you can't code for 8 hours a day or 24 hours a day. So yeah, those things get factored in order to build out a plan and a schedule.
Fair enough. And okay, last question, and then we'll go into a review of this interview. But what are you going to name this application?
Oh, wow, I hadn't even thought of that part there. Bike Now, maybe? I don't know why that came to mind, but something very simple, Bike Now.
Maybe you're thinking about biking right now.
I am, actually.
Awesome. Well, that concludes our interview. I got to say, you've done very well. You answered all those questions very eloquently. You hit a lot of different keywords and talking points that I was thinking would be good to mention in a PM interview, like you mentioned MVP, you mentioned stakeholders, you mentioned a business perspective, you mentioned who you're going to get involved, setting goals, making a prototype, how you're going to measure success, and how you're going to not just build what you've been asked to build, but how you're going to maintain it and keep it going in the future. So I would say you have been hired. I think we're going to offer you the partner group program manager position.
Awesome. I've been promoted. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, so now to go backwards in review. Do you have any comments on things that you did that if it was a candidate that you were interviewing that would really stick out to you and make you think, okay, I want to hire this person?
Um, One, yeah, I can't stress enough, do some research, understand like their products and have some sort of insights about the product that you're going into. That's super helpful, super important. To showing that sort of enthusiasm and passion, showing that you have enthusiasm and passion for things in your life is also good, because that translates to what you're going to do in your job as well. So showing that those things exist is very, very helpful.
Awesome. Yeah, I think you hit all of those things. Is there anything looking back that, if this was your interview and you were leaving and trying to learn from this experience, is there anything that you would have done differently?
I would have focused more on product naming.
Like now.
Right, bike now. Yeah, so product naming probably would have been something I should have been thinking through. But yeah, that's because that's a big one. Branding and all that other stuff comes up. So absolutely, I should have been thinking about that.
One question that we got from the audience was, during the second question, you were talking for a while and I didn't interrupt. But in an actual interview, would the interviewer sometimes interrupt and like not let you go on for so long, or?
Yeah, yeah. It depends on how articulate the person's being and whether it's making sense or things like that. But no, if it's helping the interviewer understand and get a sense of what your what you would who you are and what you would be bringing, I that would typically let it continue. If it was Yeah, they would typically let it continue. If it was something where, maybe it was a little repetitive or going over something that wasn't necessary or maybe not relevant, then the interviewer would probably start to steer the conversation in a different direction.
Gotcha. So I'm going to open it up for audience questions now. I've just enabled people um, to unmute themselves. So if you guys want to either throw something in the chat or unmute yourself and ask, now would be the time.
Hey Matt, I had a question about just like in terms of like frameworks. I've been preparing for product management interviews, and I know this is a little limiting, but I've been kind of categorizing each sort of question style based on design, execution, product sense. If you were to like bucket what your question was like based on like a category, would you say that this was an execution style question or more of a design? This also goes up to Julia too, because she was the one that asked the question.
Yeah, so I think that the final one would be was a bit of both. It had elements of design in it, in that you were trying to put together like a complete plan, and the complete plan includes the design. But it also had the execution in it as well, which was how you would, not only just have a design, but sort of take that and deliver it to the market and be successful in the market, and the timelines for doing that. So it should be, I think that's a little bit of both.
Awesome. We have another question here. This is an interesting one. So we asked 3 questions, right? If you were to rate yourself in the interview, how much would you give your answers on a scale of 1 to 10 for each of the questions?
Um, probably a 6 or a 7. I think you know, think there's always improvement you could make there. There's probably always more substance, more detail that you could include, because sometimes like the technical detail or the details sometimes matter. And so there's probably always more depth and detail that could go into. I miss having a whiteboard, like having a whiteboard that you can draw on, like you can convey almost anything with a couple of boxes, lines, and sort of diamonds. So I miss that.
Yeah, I guess this is the new world, but you can annotate on Zoom. So
I know, I should be doing that.
We got a question from Rebecca. Do you think an MBA is recommended with a Bachelor in Computer Science or even for a PM?
So MBA is definitely a plus in the PM side of things, because depending on the role that you're in, there is a heavy slant towards business. In terms of making sure that we've got appropriate pricing in place, that we've done the right market analysis, that we're analyzing what our sales could look like, projections could look like. And so an MBA is really helpful in those sorts of areas. So I'm not saying that every PM needs an MBA, but PMs with MBAs or that deep business experience are very, very helpful in the team. So yeah, we have people that have that type of experience in the team. It's very helpful.
We have a question from Kevin, who he actually asked this a little bit earlier, but he says, as a fresh graduate with minimal work experience, how can I make the company or interviewer pick me over someone who does have professional experience? He mentions he does have experience leading events for students. And can that balance his lack of work experience as a new grad?
That's a hard question. I think it really is a hard question. I mean, part of it is persistence. You've just got to keep trying and keep going out there. But it still comes back to how you can, align the passion that you've had for the things that you've done, whether it's, the student leadership work that you've done, and try to align that with, what it would take to, or how that would make you successful in that role that you're going for. To try to tailor your experience and show that you can map your experiences into something that would be there. But I think the other part is, that the biggest part of, probably that first role that you're looking for is that you're going to be willing to learn, and you're going to be willing to, to pitch in, learn, and understand. And so that would be another key thing that you could sort of show there, that you have that capability. But difficult question.
Right. Another question we got is, does Microsoft ask system design for the new grad PMs? Do you have suggestions on preparing for that?
System design, I honestly don't know. In terms of for the new grad PMs, I think we typically, asking sort of these, behavioral questions. The main goal is to really to understand how a person would be logically think through something, that what and why. That's just super important.
Now, if you were hiring for an intern for your team,
mm-hmm.
What would you expect them to have in terms of technical and behavioral skills? Are you looking more for technical, more for behavioral, or what are you hoping that they are going to bring to the table? I
think it's very much up to the candidate. I mean, it's not so much for sometimes the role, but what the candidate has in terms of their capabilities. So I think each candidate will be assessed on what they would bring, as opposed to one of those particular skills. So I don't think we'd have an affinity to either one. It's just going to be, are they going to be are they able to map their knowledge, their passion into the types of the things that we're looking to deliver, and the types of problems we're trying to solve.
Are you expecting any particular level of technical jargon during the interview?
It wouldn't be fair to expect someone to have, there's in some areas, there's a lot of deep technical jargon that we could have on maybe appliances or storage or things like that. And if a person doesn't have that experience, that's probably, that wouldn't be a fair thing. I think having an understanding of I just go back to having an understanding of the products and the types of solutions that team delivers, that's more important. That's really important. So in the case of our product set, being able to articulate or ask questions about the products that we have would be more important. The technical jargon, the three-letter acronyms, probably not as important for me anyway.
Interesting. So a lot of the times when, new grads are interviewing for PM positions, they don't know what team specifically they're interviewing with. So how can they, like, if you're just interviewing for a generic PM role at Microsoft, how do you actually prepare for that? Because you have no idea what team is going to actually be interviewing you.
That's a good question. So what I would be looking there at is, there's some very big trends with whatever company that you're going for, if it's a big company, and there'll be divisions that are doing work. So you can research what those big divisions are. Maybe it's Office or sort of online or cloud and enterprise. Like there's various big divisions within a company. I would get an understanding of what those big divisions are doing, their big objectives are, and then when you're in the interview process with a person, if you're sort of interviewing and it's more office related, you could ask them questions about the division that they're in. You may not be down at the exact product level. That would be like bonus points if you were down at that level. But at least sort of understand, so like divisionally where they fit, and you could ask sort of strategically about how if you're talking to Office, how that sort of relates maybe to like Azure or something like that.
Gotcha. So I just want to announce we are out of time. I'm happy to stay a little bit later, Matt, if you are as well.
Yeah.
But for everyone who is still here, and if you guys are willing to fill out this feedback form whenever you leave, just so that we can get a sense for what people think of these types of events. And if you guys want to see more like these, that would be awesome. I just threw the link in the chat. Anyways, back to questions for those of you who are sticking around. Let's see, we just got one from Yesha. Is it recommended to ask the interviewer which team we'd be interviewing for?
I actually don't know the answer to that question, because I'm not sure if you would be interviewing just as a general intern for applicability at Microsoft, or if it's for a particular team. So I think like an intern position that you're hiring for or coming into would be very different to, let's say, being hired into a particular product team.
Hi, I have a question.
Hey.
I saw that you said I could unmute. So I was curious specifically with regards to finding market analysis. So how would you go about obtaining the correct market analysis information and enough information regarding current trends, regarding the product you're developing?
That's sometimes a very tough thing to find. So sometimes you can be in a location or a company where you have access to market research, whether it's maybe it's Gartner, IDC, 451, all these different research groups that exist out on the market. And so that's one way of finding research. And fortunately, you may or may not have the subscription to do that, to get your hands on that data. But if you can, that's one helpful form. The other market research that you can do is, there's purely the going out and doing your web searches to find out what people are doing and what reviews they've got, or what documentation's been created. And sometimes even these analyst reports have been sponsored and published by other people and available to you that way. The other options that you have is forming your own research, which would be going out and creating a survey, going out and doing interviews to get some hands-on sort of experience or feedback from customers or people that will give you good insights, good responses to what you're looking for. So in all of these cases, you're trying to go out and find those people. And if you're in a company, and you've also got you know, the people who potentially sell the product that you're looking for. You can go and interview them and find out like what makes it easy, what makes it hard. You have your support teams as well. You know, they're the front line that are getting questions that are coming in. Sometimes those questions are, this is broken, I need help, or I'm not sure how to do something. So, you know, there's information and research to be garnered there as well. And then there's, you know, talking to your customers as well, like going out and being able to you know, directly talk to and get that feedback from them. And I guess the final level is, you know, depending on the product that you're working with, some have got, you know, instrumentation that can help you get guided on how the product's being used, or where people are getting stuck, to help you with those improvements. Does that
Thank
help,
you.
Jeff?
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you so much. And
No worries.
just about the market groups, you said something about market groups at the beginning. Could you just repeat that?
Oh, so, you know, there's various like industry sort of research groups, Gartner, IDC, 451 group. Like there's a ton of different ones that are out there, and you know, they can do sort of syndicated. They've got syndicated research that you can purchase, that can also sort of help guide some of your decisions.
Thank
No worries.
Hi, Matt. Thank you so much for answering so many questions. My question would be about, in terms of practicing for these PM interviews, there, of course, we could do as much practice in mock interviews, but would you recommend maybe applying to certain PM roles that perhaps we're not as interested in, not including Microsoft, of course, but some other smaller PM roles, for example, just to get some experience with the application process and kind of use it as a testing ground for our current resume status or our current preparation?
Um, I would probably more recommend, you know, doing that with roles that you really want. Like when you're putting yourself out there, you know, there's a lot of people that have to review the resumes and have that discussion. So if it's not something that you're interested in, I just wouldn't recommend that you put yourself through that, or the other people, you know, other teams of people out there through that as well. I think that, you know, I would be more inclined to, you know, put yourself on the line for a role that you really wanted, and prepare for that, and be, you know, maybe you learn on the fly, and maybe there's some failure that you're going to have to go through there, but it's sort of, you're trying for something that you really want, which, you know, should be more incentive to do well and to show up well.
For sure, thank you.
No worries.
Sunny, you had a question?
Yeah, it was about like, how do you set apart like a good candidate from like others during like a Microsoft interview?
You know, it's up to the candidate's responses. Like, you know, it's everything from, you know, the knowledge and experience that they have, you know, their decision making processes that they've gone through, you know, the diversity of opinion, and you know, background that can sort of help our team, and what that's going to bring to us. It's all of those sort of attributes sort of come together. There's not just one thing that's going to come out and say this is the right person. It's typically you know, a set of those things come together to make a person the right fit for a team.
Another question that we got was, what is headcount looking like right now? Is Microsoft hiring new grad PMs?
I don't know about new grad PMs, but I know that there's positions that are open and people are hiring. I'm sorry, I just don't have insight into the new grad pipeline.
Is your team hiring? Do you know?
We are, yeah, we're hiring PMs. I just don't know, like I said, like the specifics on new grad ones. I don't know.
Yeah, I have heard that headcount is slowing down a little bit right now because of coronavirus, but I could be wrong.
Okay, no, well, I know that we're still hiring, so.
Awesome. Yeah, I guess the tech industry in particular is still booming right now, so there are definitely worse places to be.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. I think we should probably wrap up here, but if people want to contact you in the future, is there a way that they can reach out?
Sure. I can put my personal email in the chat window. That's probably actually find me on LinkedIn too. That's probably I'll put that profile in LinkedIn. I think there's probably a few people that have. I noticed my LinkedIn requests went up this week, so that's probably related to this.
That happens here with Intern Club. After Intern Con, I got like 200 requests. It was insane.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for coming to attend, and thank you, Matt, for your time and for going a little bit overtime and doing the preparation for this. This was super valuable, and I learned a lot. Hopefully other people did too. And yeah, I will send out a follow-up with his information. And if, as always, if anyone has more questions, feel free to reach out to me about these events, or if you're having trouble finding the right contact information, etc. But hopefully this will be uploaded to YouTube. And yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, please go fill out that feedback form. That would be awesome. I can post that link once more. But thank you guys, and thank you so much, Matt.
Oh, thank you, everyone. It was really fun to have a chat. See you later, everyone.
Cheers. Stop.